Okay, it is 4:30. I'm calling the meeting to order. I'd like to acknowledge that the District of Tofino operates within the territory of the Tla-o-qui-aht First Nation. Tla-o-qui-aht. Notice the attendees of the meeting has been video recorded and will be published in the district YouTube channel. And a notice to attendees who are on Zoom that if somebody wants to sign up for a public comment period, please go to the question and answer thing on the Zoom. Your Zoom screen, and please sign up with your name, residential address, and the agenda item that you wish to speak. Once again on Zoom, question and answer, the option on question Zoom. I recommend that pursuant to section 15 of the District of Tofino, Canadian Procedure Bylaw number 1229, 2016 is amended to February 21st, 2020, regular meeting be held electronically via Zoom and live broadcast on the District of Tofino channel, and that the facility provided to the public to watch and hear the meeting be located at Municipal Hall 380 Campbell Street in Tofino. Please unanimous consent if there are no objections. Also, through unanimous consent, if there are no objections, I move that February 21st, 2022 regular council agenda be adopted. Give the consent to the agenda. Also, through unanimous consent, if there are no objections, I'll move that items 4.1 to 4.4 of the consent agenda on the regular council meeting held February 21st, 2023 be approved and received. Seeing no objections, that motion is carried. Mr. Shortall, do we have anybody signed up for public comments on agenda items?
Yes, Mayor Law, we do indeed. We have Mike Holekamp. Residential address is 768 Chaster Road, Courtenay, and he'd like to speak to item 10.3.
Excellent. And is Mr. Holekamp on Zoom?
He is indeed.
Okay.
I'm going to unmute him now.
And Mr. Holekamp, hope you can hear me. You've got 2 minutes to make public comment on the agenda items. And go ahead. Please state your name and your address.
Mike Holekamp, 768 Chaster Road, Courtenay is my permanent address. Am I coming through okay? Okay. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Mike Holekamp, as I said, and I am one of the owners proposing rezoning 521 Cypre Crescent, agenda item 10.3. Before I get to the project, I wanted to speak a bit about my family experience in town. My dad was one of the first people to buy a share on Wickenish Island in the late 70s. Some of the best memories I have of my childhood were spent in Tofino and on that island. And as a result, I feel a deep connection with Clackamas Sound and the people I've had the pleasure of getting to know and call friends. My first paying job as a teenager was Method Marine. During my years at university, I spent summers working as a whale watch guide while my girlfriend and now wife worked at breakers and shelter. So, you know, we've been there for a long time and we've really watched the town grow and have made, you know, some wonderful friends and memories along the way. When I was 23, I started a commercial prawning business with my brother, and this was also around the time that we renovated our house on Cypre Crescent and began operating a mixed long-term and vacation rentals. In 2019, I opened the Daylight Cannabis Shop with my longtime friend and business partner, Kyle Meager. When we submitted our original application, we targeted our social benefit contribution towards supporting the Tofino Fire Station, local nonprofits, and of course, defining our success as a business by how we served our staff and the community. And I believe our record to this point demonstrates our commitments to each of those standards. I bring this up because I want everyone to consider my character and motivations behind this project and this rezoning application. I've been in business for myself for 12 years and consider myself an entrepreneur. That said, I've always made sure that whether as a business person or landlord or whatever, I'm never taking advantage of anyone. I've never paid someone less than I would want for the same job, nor have I ever charged someone an amount of rent I'd be unwilling to pay myself. As mentioned before, Tofino always felt like home to me, and I would never do anything that I thought would negatively impact the community. And while I recognize that change is always hard in small communities, I just wanted everyone to be aware that we worked really hard at designing this project.
Mr. Holekamp, I have to interject. You've reached your 2-minute limit.
Okay. That was it. That was all I was going to say. I just wanted to finish saying we designed this with Tahitians in mind. And thank you so much for listening. And I look forward to your comments.
Thank you. Mr. Charnell, do we have anybody else signed up for?
Yes, Mayor Law, we have Maris MacDonald from 2118 Austin Road, Comox, and she's also wishing to speak to item 10.3.
Excellent. Now, sorry, what was the name? Miss
Maris MacDonald.
Ms. McDonald. Ms. McDonald, you have 2 minutes. Please restate your name there and your address.
Can you hear me?
Hello.
Yeah, hello. So my name is Maris MacDonald. I'm at 2118 Austin Road in Comox. I'm an architect in the Comox Valley for MacDonald Hegarty Architects. As Mikey just noted, actually just took me down a memory lane as well. I also grew up embedded in town, paid for my graduate degree and undergraduate degree whale watching as a guide and working at the Commonwealth Bakery. I can still remember there was just one stop sign in town at First and Campbell. It was a big deal when the second stop sign was added at 4th Street. Over the past decade, the epicenter of town has also changed, gradually moving southwards. 521 Cypre is the next purely residential property not being utilized to its full potential. As with most communities around Vancouver Island, Tofino faces challenges around long-term affordable housing. This type of housing is critical and community wants to maintain its current capacity, let alone facilitate any growth. It is important that this is the right type of housing. In order to create the right kind of housing stock, density is essential. As you are aware, Tofino has created over 120 units over the past 6 years, but only 30 of which have been multifamily units. In order to reduce the upward pressure, more of these units need to be created. While we are at the beginning of design process, we have transparently included our full drawings to initiate the discussion of what the community wants to see at this location. We have focused on all the points that have been set out in your OCP. We have always encouraged a collaborative effort amongst planning staff and yourselves to bring to town the development that everyone is happy with and meets the intent that has been set out in your official community plan. Think of these as a first draft, and we look forward to your comments today and in the future. And thank you very much for considering our proposal. And we're very excited to be actually doing this development in town.
Thank you. Mr. Shortall.
Mayor Law, that's it for public comments.
Excellent. Thank you very much. To the mayor's report, we do have, I have a notice to the public that regarding each optional dog spaces. Now the Talk Tofino page is not closed for that, but there will be opportunity for public consultation on March 7th at the Budget Town Hall from 4 to 6 p.m. right here in Council Chambers. So March 7th, 4 to 6 p.m. in Council Chambers, people could come, and if they wish to speak to the leash optional dog, I guess investigation kind of council and staff are going through, then that's a good time. Today is International Down Syndrome Day. A lovely letter from organizing for International Down Syndrome Day, and it's given me the chance to really reflect on the folks that I've known over the years and know who live and have lived with Down syndrome, and all of my experience had the remarkable ability to delight in the people around them and to love with abandon. And I just reflect what an extraordinary gift that is to our world. What else we got? I was in Ottawa at the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Sustainable Communities Conference. And it was a fantastic conference. People from all over Canada came, staff, elected officials, government staff, non-profit staff, for-profit staff, and the focus was on everything sustainable. And it was a fantastic chance to meet people and meet other governments to see what we are doing very well and what other people are doing very well, other governments are doing well, that we can beg for on steel. And I also have to say how how indebted I am to our MP Courtenay, who not only showed us around Ottawa and went far over and above for us while we stayed there in hospitality, but I got to see him at work, and it was wonderful to see how much he is doing, how much effort he's putting into our community and our region. So a shout out to Courtenay. It's also great to be at the AVICC, new government leadership days. And I'm hang out briefly with council, and that was a pleasure. Mayor's breakfast tomorrow in the Commonwealth. I think it's 9 o'clock. So, if anybody wants to show up at the mayor's breakfast tomorrow, I'll be there. The councilors to come. That is all from me for my mayor's reports. I believe we're on to delegations. We have a delegation from Ms. Marcy DeWitt, Alberta Cypre Health Network. Ms. DeWitt, are you online? I see you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me. You can see me, you can see my colleague here, Tony, and I'm just going to share my screen so we have something to go along with. All right. So as always, thank you for having us at the council meetings. We aim to present to council across the region at least once a year. And the intention is to really familiarize new and current council with what the Tla-o-qui-aht Health Network is undertaking this year, and to ensure that new council members have that opportunity to get to know what the health network does in our region. So my name is Marcy DeWitt. I'm zooming into you from the Tla-o-qui-aht territories. Sorry I couldn't join in person, but I did want my colleague to join, and she wasn't able to travel today. So we also have Tony Buston, who is our youth facilitator for our West Coast communities. So I want to give you a brief introduction to the Tla-o-qui-aht Health Network, and then I'll get into the projects and areas of work that we have going at this moment. So the Tla-o-qui-aht Health Network is a multidisciplinary network, and we have been running since 2011. We work with all 3 municipalities, 10 Neutral nations, and 6 electoral areas in the Tla-o-qui-aht Regional District. And since pretty much 2015 on, we've been working very hard around social determinants of health, ensuring that we have good community engagement, and are moving forward policy and action around issues such as poverty reduction, transportation, and health equity that have a big impact on our health, but are not necessarily funded directly through our health system. So we do receive funding through the through Island Health annually, as well as we did receive a kind of lump sum to initiate the network back in 2012. And our fiscal host is the Tla-o-qui-aht Regional District. So we have strong ties to our local leadership through that relationship, and always look forward to incorporating further relationships with our municipalities. So just a quick update on the Tla-o-qui-aht Health Network structure. We are a non-entity. We're vested under the Tla-o-qui-aht Regional District. We have a table of partners, which is very similar to a board, but we invest a lot more, I guess, onus on our table of partners members to be bringing information in and sharing information out, as well as assisting with resourcing some of our projects. So this is just a quick list of our 2022 table membership. We've just done a new intake and have new membership from the regional districts, District of Tofino, School District 70, as well as many of the folks that you see here. In addition to our table of partners, we have action tables, and these are opportunities for the network to move forward work that aligns with our priorities. So a great example of one of our action tables is our West Coast Transportation Action Table, which I'll be delving into.
Mr. Witt,
Yes.
I realize, you know, if you've got slides, we're not seeing
Oh, you're not seeing them.
them.
It's just the title slide is showing.
You've just got Alberni-Clayoquot Health Network, the title slide.
Oh, well, that is interesting. Resume share. How does that look?
There you go. Perfect.
Great. All right. Well, at least you didn't miss too much. So thank you very much for letting me know. All right, so we're still working from our 2018 strategic plan, in which we identified 4 priority areas. Those are network development, community connectedness, which incorporates transportation and health equity, building regional prosperity, which is very much focused on poverty reduction, and knowledge and capacity building. I'll go into a little bit more on what we've done in each one of those areas and where we're headed. So building regional prosperity, just this last year, we launched the Building Prosperity in the Alberni-Clayoquot Poverty Reduction Action Plan. So that was completed in 2021 and was presented around to the communities in 2022. That features 4 various different priority areas, a lot of research and statistics if you would like to take a look, and priority areas around income, housing, mental health and health supports, and equity and stigma reduction. Within this plan, there is a kind of primary underpinning of an equity framework, which is one of the main areas that the Alberni-Clayoquot Health Network will be moving forward on in the future, outside of advocacy and support on data and research for local governments in these other realms. So I mentioned connected communities and the transportation issues that we have done a lot of work around. So over the past several years, we've conducted transportation consultations for the region, put together what you see here on the screenshot, which is a transportation assets map, which maps out transportation mechanisms and costs for various different communities throughout our region to other medical services. And we've worked in collaboration with many organizations, including BC Transit, to further transit work here in West Coast communities, as well as within ACRD communities. And at this point, we've been working with the ACRD to convene the West Coast Transportation Action Table and assist in informing the, I guess it's the alternative transportation consultation through WATS Consulting, which will be looking at opportunities for alternative transportation in our West Coast communities until there is BC Transit or other opportunities to implement a more wholesome transportation system. Knowledge and capacity building is our kind of last bigger realm, and within this priority area, we do a lot to sponsor and support community dialogue and education, especially those opportunities around any emergent needs and priorities in our region. We support the identification and advocacy throughout kind of on island-wide priority areas. So
sorry to interrupt. There's something wrong with your, all of a sudden your voice is getting a little garbled.
Okay.
I think that it's either a feedback with another microphone perhaps on. Yeah.
No, I don't, but I can.
Sounds good now.
Is that a little bit better?
That's perfect. I'll give you an extra minute.
Okay, thank you. One of those days, hey? All right, so on top of, We are throughout our community health network. We are able to support the identification and advocacy on shared priorities throughout Vancouver Island. So we utilize opportunities to bring together health networks from across Vancouver Island in order to bring those items up to our higher levels of government, especially when looking around transportation and other kind of bigger issues that are impacting our rural and remote communities on the islands. And through our knowledge and capacity building initiatives, we have also had the opportunity to bring forward a program called Communities Building Youth Futures. And I have Tony here to just say a quick hello. She is our West Coast Community Youth Facilitator. We've had the privilege of hiring 3 youth facilitators for the Alberni-Tla-o-qui-aht region. We have one in Alberni Valley, one in Barclay, and then Tony here in the West Coast communities. And Tony, if you wanted to say a quick 2 seconds summary of their work in the program, that'd be wonderful.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, hi, I'm a resident of Tla-o-qui-aht and I've been on the project since last June, and we've done so much work since then, engaging youth in different leadership activities and getting them to speak out about things that they want to see in the region, and starting some new youth spaces and just really highlighting what youth need and what can be added to the area. So yeah, we've just had lots of exciting things on the go. And yeah, I really encourage you to look into our site or follow our Facebook or any of our social media just to kind of see what we're up to. And we're going to be starting a newsletter too. So yeah, it's really exciting, and we're really trying to hear the youth voices in the region and get them engaged more in the communities.
Thanks, Tony. And so be on the lookout for a youth gathering in your community starting up ASAP. And we've also had the opportunity to support a variety of different great programs that are going on in within the District of Tofino. Up on the horizon for this year, we have just received confirmation that we will be receiving another year's funding for the Communities Building Youth Futures. So that allows us additional opportunity to build these youth networks, to ensure that there's sustainability in the projects that we are moving forward. And then, really hoping that we have that ability to continue ensuring good youth engagement within our projects. We're currently working on an application to the UBCM Poverty Reduction Stream 2. So that will be looking at enhancing equity and doing some education around equity and stigma reduction for our local decision makers. So ensuring that there is the ability to design and deliver a workshop, as well as some toolkits around what does equity look like and how do we make equitable decisions for our communities. We will be planning a spring network gathering to plan around our health priorities, and that will be feeding into our 2023 strategic plan. And we also have an island-wide community health network gathering coming up. So we will be extending invitations out to local leaders. You will likely receive one, and if you're interested, please get in touch to find out more. We've also been confirmed for ADICC, so we will be doing a community health network workshop within ADICC as well. So just in closing, thank you very much for sitting with me through the tech glitches today. I wanted to just extend an invitation to check out more about us. We have a great website. You can find here, I've starred a couple key areas. All of our reports, annual reports, governance documents are in the About ACHN area, and any of our work around transportation, poverty reduction, the action plan is there, as well as a tab in knowledge and capacity building for our communities building youth futures projects. All of our contact information is there, and our monthly meetings are actually open meetings, so anybody is welcome to join. And I look forward to connecting with you in the future. And
Super, thanks, Mr. Witt.
thank you.
And I'm just gonna, if you're willing, I'm just gonna open it up to council and see if any councilors have any questions for you. Any questions for Mark? No, I'm actually gonna look, I'm looking forward to looking at all your reports. Jotting down notes already, so that's great. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Okay, let's move on. Correspondence. We have 9.1 correspondence from Ms. Fraser regarding tree removal. Any comments from council on this letter?
Yeah, I believe we had a little bit of information from staff before, and I just want to see if I'm correct in my information. That they will make an effort to work around the trees and not remove them unless they have to.
That is my understanding, yeah. We're clear about that.
Yep. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I enjoyed the letter and I think that it's something, this project specifically, as we heard, we will do our best to keep done. And I was speaking with someone walking down the street the other day and they're saying like, that's the only shady place to sit if you're watching a skate park. So I think everyone does appreciate the value of those trees. And it's just really good reminder going forward with all of our upcoming projects to really keep that in mind, to try to keep as much of those shade bearing trees around as we can, because even if we plant new ones, we won't grow that big that fast.
Council? I personally appreciate staff's. I know that some staff try very hard to the vegetation and trees as possible. Thank you. 9.2, we have correspondence from ACRD. Draft financial plan. Do we have a comment from council on this one? Mr. Steve? Councilor Steve? Councilor Tom? Oh,
thank you. Yeah, I'm having it seems that there's a lot of technical difficulty going on with mine as well. It keeps knocking me out here. But yeah, ACRD is right in the middle of the financial planning process. I'm always amazed at the ability of the CFO, Terry Fong, to put together such a comprehensive with all the electoral areas, the municipalities, and include that in. I'm going to give a next council meeting. I'll give a more thorough update on the financial planning process. We're having another meeting. ACRD is having a meeting tomorrow, and we'll be following up with some more extensive financial planning information.
super. Thank you, Councilor Steer. And I do encourage everybody to actually follow that link, the ACRD link, and look at their draft financial plan. It does give also a very good overview of what the ACRD does in the region. So it's a really good document to have a look at. 9.3, correspondence from Honorable Ann Kane, Minister of Municipal Affairs regarding growing community funds. But before I say something, the council like to say something about that. That's a totally valid thing to say. This is exciting. I'm just so pleased to see this come down our way unannounced. It is a spectacular surprise, and I look forward to further news from the province on the growing communities fund. Association of Vancouver Island and Coastal Communities letter regarding the 2023 annual general meeting, ABICC annual general meeting, and here we have some decisions to make. Registration is open for the ABICC AGM, and certainly open to council. Do we have any councillors who would like to attend the ABICC AGM? Excellent. April 14th to 16th. Is there any major, I'm just gonna look here. Do we have any major conflicts with our schedules?
Mayor Law, typically we plan for council, all of council to attend this session as well as UDCM. So it is in council's budget that may be helpful for decision making today. And we don't foresee any conflicts with is the district schedule regarding this session.
Excellent. All right. Well, I'm in. Who else wants to go?
I would like to attend this one or the next one on the agenda, one or the other. But it depends on if other councillors are going to be able to. So if we're sending two councillors to the housing summit, then I would attend the SCC. If
Okay.
only one councillor is going to the housing summit, I would go to that one. But I don't think I can squeeze both.
Yeah, and we do have a conflict for the next one, Housing Summit. It's our, I believe it's our third financial plan day. That does pose a problem, so I don't know if there's an option to move that day so that councillors can go to the summits or.
Yeah, thanks for your law. If we have quorum for the budget meeting, it would be okay. I haven't checked in with the Housing Corporation to see if other board members are intending on applying any time frames for that. Would be relevant.
I mean, I'd be happy, Councilor Anderson.
Okay. I think we should send at least one of the members of council that's on the.
I wouldn't mind going for the short-term rental, but I mean, I attended 2 or 3 years ago, and a lot of it was big city stuff, for want of a better word. But now there's a focus on some short-term rental, but that does affect us. So I'd be interested in going for that. Benefit from the housing stuff as well.
I'm not on the board, but I would like to contribute.
Okay. That's fine. Yeah, no, that's fine. We'd probably send 2, but 3 would be pushing it. Then we have to. We run into issues having our financial planning. So, what, Councilor Master? Are you? Do you want to go to the housing summit or?
Yeah, I think it should.
Okay.
I'll choose ABSCC.
Okay, then that means we've got 2 councillors to go to the housing summit. Okay. Oh, and Councillor Steer, have you got your hand up? Oh, I see it. It's blinded by the light. It looks like a light shining.
No, I was just that I would attend ABICC and I didn't realize the hand was still up because it's blinded by the light.
That should be a song.
Is it advised that we all attend the ABICC? If it's like highly suggested, then I'm happy to go. If it's like something that we feel is somewhat optional, then I would stand down from it just so the weekend to get that for me. But if we feel it's like very beneficial, then I'm happy to arrange my schedule to be there.
I
know that's a tough question.
I think it's good still, but I don't think that people have to. That's my opinion.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. I don't want to push it, I don't want to pressure anybody. I haven't actually been to one because in COVID and everything happened for several years. So, can't recall any. No, that's fine.
I think it's better networking opportunities because it's all company and Sunshine Coast. So the other communities that attend and the other councillors and mayors that we might meet there are usually the issues are a little closer to home and more relevant to Tofino. When you get to UCM, you'll see those people there too, but it's the whole province. So you know, we may not have as much in common, as many shared interests as with the Okanagan as we do with other communities. Yeah, so I and it's smaller scale too. So it's to me a little bit more relevant to our region.
I'm sorry to have that discussion here.
Oh, it's okay. It's all right. Okay, it's good. Council meeting. It's your time. Okay, well then what I'll do is, let's take a list of all the councilors. You're gonna go to ABACC, AGM. So I have Councilor Anderson, Councilor Steer, Councilor Sawyer, Councilor Sloman. Are you going to the ABAC? No. And Councilor Master, you are going to go. ABAC. So I have Anderson, Steer, Sawyer, Master, Thomas Law. That's it. Okay, so would somebody like to make that motion, and we'll just ask Mr. Shortall to put all those names. Who would like to? Oh, all right. I move that Councilor Anderson, Steer, Sawyer, McMaster, Thomas, and Mayor Law be authorized to attend the 2022 Association of Vancouver Coastal Communities AGM, April 14th, 16th, 2023, in the Mount BC, and be reimbursed for costs in accordance with District of Tofino Council Remuneration Bylaw number 1254, 2018. Seconded by Councilor Thomas. Any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed, motion carried. Okay, moving on to Union of British Columbia Municipalities Housing Summit. I believe we have Councilor Sloman and Councilor Master. I'll do that again. Why not? Okay, I'll move that Councilor Sloman and Councilor Master be authorized to attend the Union of British Columbia Municipalities Housing Summit April 4th, 5th, 2023 in Vancouver, BC, and be reimbursed for costs in accordance with District of Tofino Council Remuneration Bylaw 1254. Thomas, any further comments? All in favor? No opposed. Okay, first one, 9.6, like old times. We have included secondary school regarding 2022 scholarship and bursary awards. So essentially what has happened is that the council has given a scholarship and bursary, whatever one's called, and that has run out. So we'll just basically be looking at council for feedback. I do have a draft motion to donate for scholarships and bursaries for 2023, 2024, 2025. Council.
Mayor Law?
Yes, Councilor Steer.
I just had a quick question. It's similar to in 2019 when we passed a resolution. It had been included for a 4-year position, and the audio is really difficult, so I didn't know if you had read or you're going to read a motion that might address that. I did hear that you had a draft motion. So if that's going to be inclusive of for a multiple year commitment, that'd be great. I'll refrain from making my comment if that will be the case.
Yeah, thank you, Councilor Steer. I do have a draft motion to authorize X amount for the next 4 years.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Law.
Can we just, before you go, though, can we just, we really should figure out your audio. So is the audio cutting in and out? Can you hear everything we're saying?
I can. It's just very, it seems like there's a lot of distortion, and I can hear every single pen movement, it seems, as well. And it depends on who's facing the mic, I believe. I can manage. It's just there does seem to be at times that I have to listen extremely carefully.
Maybe take a recess for a few minutes, because I think we've identified the issue and we just need a moment to fix it.
Okay, tell you what, perfect. We're going to call a couple minute recess here so we can fix the audio, and then we'll come back and we'll deal with this motion for USS scholarship. So we're just reconvening here, but we're going to have to shut Zoom down and restart. So members of the public that are on Zoom listening, please use the same link to get back into Zoom. And hopefully that will be able to take care of our audio issues. We do want people to be able to hear.
Mayor Law, that sounds way better now. I don't know.
Oh, really? Is it working now magically?
Okay, let's try it.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what, if it's working for you, Councillor Steer, then let's go ahead and carry on. And if it at any point stops working, we will we'll just recess, restart Zoom. Okay.
Right, yeah, the audio is way better.
Okay, well, there you go. That's magically, it just needed a break. So the thing about the little background for the scholarships for everybody from 2015 to 2018, the USS scholarship amount was $1,500 per year. For the next 4 years, from 2019 to 2022, it was $2,000 per year. And this is a good time to discuss that amount. I think, in my personal opinion, the pressures, the inflationary pressures, the cost of housing has gone up a lot, and of course, it's affecting students as they go to university. So I'm going to look to council. I would like to see this increase from 2,000 to something else, but I'm going to open it up to council.
Taking a number out of the blue, 2,500.
2,500.
That's a 25%.
Yeah.
Is the scholarship bursary tied to any particular academic stream?
I don't
Okay,
believe it is. It isn't. It's just they just have to be enrolled in post-secondary education institution.
And it says, and are needing financial support and right to Tofino residents.
Okay.
And are in need of financial support and right to Tofino residents.
That's right.
That's the full criteria.
I think it's pretty important. So, well, we have 2,500. I think we've gone up. We've shown 500, about 500 increase already. I think 25% stretched out over 4 years makes sense considering the rate of inflation right now. Councillor Steer.
Yeah, well, I am very supportive, of course. I see the value of these types of scholarships clearly and within the communities. And just to Councillor Sawyer, what the criteria is planning to pursue any post-secondary education and a resident of Tofino, and those are the only criteria for the scholarship. I'm highly supportive of the increase up to 2,500 for the next 4 years. And that is my opinion.
And it might seem a little high given the whatever cost of living increases over the past 4 years. It's only recently we've hit some higher inflation rates, but this is also the amount going into the next 4 years. So 4 years from now, it'll still be 2,500.
That's true. Okay, well then I have the draft motion in front of me. I will insert 2,500 and go from there. So I'll move that the District of Tofino donate up to 2,500 per year for scholarships or bursaries to graduating students from the Courtenay Secondary School in the years 2023, 2024, 2025, and 2026, and that staff is authorized to renew the USS Scholarship Award agreement under the same eligibility criteria as previously. Second by Councillor Thomas. Any further comments on it? Okay, seeing none, all in favor? None opposed, motion carried. Thank you. All right, we have presentations and reports. And we have the Green and Inclusive Community Building Fund application, Tofino Community Recreation Facility, and we have Haley.
Afternoon, Mayor and Council. Erin and I are both co-presenting this.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. My part of the presentation will just be a little bit of history, and I'm going to move through it quite quickly. We have another meeting. We probably won't have to be at 5:30 about this project at the co-op, and so I'm going to just move us through a little bit of the history and how we got here, and then we'll move on to the funding and potential ways to pay for the facility. So this is a project that I've been involved with for probably over 10 years now, with Councillor Steer way back when, Councillor Master. The intent is to build an indoor recreation facility that's essentially a gym for the community. So we have somewhere to recreate in the winter time and the rain months. The images that I'm going to flip through here pretty quickly in front of you are not meant to impress, but just meant to explain how much work has gone into this. And so the latest iteration has been, council was granted a staff about $120,000, $125,000 last year to progress our design from Class C to Class B, and particularly target the grant that April and I are going to be speaking about today. So just really quickly, quick virtual tour. The image on the left would be what you'd see coming up from the community hall side. The image on the right shows you how there's the two buildings would be situated. Again, as I started off with, this is a gym, so you can see that big, large green area in the middle is a high school size gym. There's a small multi-purpose room to the north there, so the top of your of the image, as well as support spaces like washrooms, storage, office space, generator room, electrical, all those type of things. We have, as I said earlier, moved forward to Class B, which is 80% design standard, design level of drawings that we completed about 3 or 4 months ago. And again, this is particularly in response to the GICB grant program. The current cost of this facility, best as we know, is $14.6 million. That includes 15% contingency. Those are 2022 numbers. Again, this is another image of it from the outside, an image from inside where you can see the basketball court, the divider that allows you to separate the space if you need to be bleachers for sporting or cultural events. You can see there in the sort of dark brown along the bleachers is one of the features that allows us to apply for this building to be a net zero building. It deals with passive ventilation from the west and then circulates underneath the bleachers and out into the space. You can see the baffles in that picture, and the intent is to use timber and then pursue grants through the BC Wood Council if possible. As you'd come into the entrance of the building on the left there, you'd see a little sitting room and then an office for district recreation staff. And then to the right of the door, you'd see this multi-purpose room, which have a sprung floor, bar, mirrors, to use things like yoga or small sporting activities. You can see through the windows there, you can see the existing community hall. And finally, this is just looking down the hallway. The image on your left is looking back towards the community hall. So on the left of that picture where the person's sitting would be the gym, and on the right are the washrooms, and then there's something very similar on the right. So those are the renderings. I'm going to leave the detailed stuff up to April. I'm going to sit down and get ready to go.
Thanks, Aaron. So the funding application that staff has been working on is for the Green and Inclusive Community Buildings Program. It's offered through Infrastructure Canada for projects like this. Projects to be eligible must meet net zero carbon building design standards. And as Mr. Rogers said, this building has designed specifically targeting this funding opportunity. And so we've met that as well. Projects must meet the highest published accessibility standards, which it does. And the application deadline for this funding is February 28th. So the $14.6 million, the funding, the grant would cover approximately 8.1, 8.2 based on the funding formula, which leaves the applicant share of the project at just over $6.5 million. Looking at how to fund the district share, the annual debt repayment for the district's portion based on current interest rates, 30 years, amortized over 30 years, is estimated to be approximately $379,000. Pay parking revenue is estimated when calculated, including both beach and downtown pay parking, to be at about $700,000. So is a potential way to fund the district's debt servicing costs for the facility. And it would be within, the 6.5 would be within the district's current borrowing, available borrowing limits. Obviously, we're borrowing for the wastewater treatment plant as well, of 11.5 million. Staff is actively looking at other funding sources, including the recently announced Growing Communities Fund, which does specifically target recreation facilities as possible projects. Also looking at fundraising and contributions from private donors. And then, of course, increasing political awareness with representatives from higher levels of government so that they're aware of the district's application and of the project. Should the district's funding application be successful, further community engagement will be required to support the development and adoption of a borrowing bylaw. And so a quick presentation. The district does require a resolution from council as part of the funding application. And these are the two resolutions there. They're in the staff report as well. And Erin and I are happy to answer any questions if there are any. And I see our CAO has her hand up.
Thank you. April, can you just go back to your slide that talks about the servicing costs? I just wanted to highlight for council that we did make an amendment to the report to council in your packages. And so these numbers are reading the old version of the report.
Apologies.
No, that's okay. So the annual debt repayment for the District of Tofino, rather than 379,000, that should read 400,211. And the current available borrowing limit states 11.5 million, but should read 11.1 million.
Excellent. Okay, noting that time is of the essence for you. Questions from council? Councilman Master.
Yeah, well, obviously I've been supportive of this project from day one. Question on the borrowing limits. In your report, you mentioned long-term borrowing limits, including the wastewater treatment plant and water system. Does the water system include if we have to go and find a new water source or expand the reservoir? And if we have to do that, how does that affect it?
If I may, through your worship. So the water debt that we're referring to in that section of the report relates to the existing debt for the reservoir. If we were to go out and further seek long-term borrowing, it would likely be related to the water system within that borrowing limit. In addition to discussing the potential borrowing and the existing borrowing limits, if we were to borrow that amount, we also address that we are seeking funds to draw down the borrowing amount for this project in an effort to leave future borrowing capacity for the water system.
Okay.
Councilor Steer.
Thank you. I first want to just quickly acknowledge the work that staff has done over the years, particularly Mr. Rogers, the persistence on this. I cannot speak highly enough. I have a quick comment and then a question regarding similar in vein to Councillor McMaster's in terms of borrowing limits. One of the quick question or comment referring to the paid parking revenues, and I just want to for council and for staff, we as council we have not had the ability to have a fulsome discussion on where those allocation of those revenues may be put to or best uses of. So that is something that we still have to have a much more in-depth conversation around. But thank you for charting out one of those potential revenue sources for debt servicing. My question comes around, and it's similar to, I think, the vein Councillor McMaster was going down, and it'll be directed to Ms. Bodnar, particularly with the amount that would be required to borrow, and hopefully that that amount will be reduced significantly. The question is around the comfort level with the, as you know, we are legislated, we can only borrow a certain amount, and to be able to be left with a contingency for emergency or other potential infrastructure projects is Ms. Bodnar, would you, is that a comfortable amount that we would still have available to us?
Thank you through the chair. Thank you for your question, Councillor Steele. Yes, I am very comfortable with this recommendation on the grant application. I'm comforted that we're looking for other ways to draw down that total borrowing I'm also comforted that we're looking at other sources of revenue to service that debt. I also want to point out that the $2.2 million annual servicing limit that we currently have is based on 2021 financial results. And that number will be updated once we file our 2022 year end, which that goes through the province. So that could take a while. To date, council has approved long-term borrowing for critical asset replacement. And I think that's very fiscally prudent way of managing this finite type of funding. So when it comes to legacy assets, which is like this is a legacy asset more so than a critical asset replacement. Definitely council will have to, really look at those pros and cons of that. But from a fiscally, point of view, yes, I've got comfort in that we've got that room right now to borrow for future replacements that Ms. Antiana was talking about.
Thank you, Ms. Bonner.
Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, I'm just, I don't know if anyone has an answer to this specific question just yet, but I think in the discussion around funding sources for debt servicing, possibly using pay parking revenues, I am in support of that, but I think we need to also think about revenue sources for future operating costs as well. So when we get to that discussion, I'd like to know a little more about what we estimate for operating costs. I don't know if we have those numbers right now. It might be too specific and too early a question for anyone to really answer. The other comment I have, I am in support of moving ahead. I'm hoping that, and I think I've heard that in the presentation, that we can stack other grant opportunities onto this grant. Sometimes grant opportunities are great, but you're not allowed to use them in conjunction with other grants for the same project. So I'm hoping that that we may bring that debt and the debt servicing down and look for other grant opportunities as we move ahead, and hopefully get other grants to go towards this. And it's my final comment. I'd be interested to know, and we may have already spent any reserves we've had. We've had some amenity contributions towards recreation, I believe, and I think they they're kind of like spare change compared to the costs of these things. But I'd like to know at some point what reserves we might have to apply to that, and then work on a strategy for community fundraising, because I'd like to see that debt brought down as much as possible.
Okay, I'm not sure if there's any questions that staff can answer. Maybe, yes, please, Mr. Moore.
Through the chair, I will address the operating cost question. Staff will be bringing forward projected operating costs. There was some preliminary work done on that through the budget meeting this Thursday. So we'll have some further information for council, because it is a net zero building. The operating costs related to things like hydro are anticipated to be very low, if that's helpful.
Just want to go in with eyes wide open.
Right. Okay. Councilor McMaster.
I have two comments. When Aaron did his first presentation, he mentioned this is basically a box. I presume the size of that box is constrained by the land that's available. I'm sure the layout of what I saw on the plans of the courts are going to have to change, because it's not going to suit the sports that are played in there. So I'm assuming that's tentative because it doesn't work. So you're going to have a discussion with the projected users to sort out that layout. And my next comment was in the recommendation, the second part, which says commits to securing the municipal share of project costs. Maybe it's just my English, but that sounds a little strong because commits to securing almost seems that we're going to get the money wherever it comes from. That's something. And we've still got public consultations.
Through the chair, part of the required resolution as part of the grant application is that the district commit to securing, whether that's through grant funds, other grant funds, fundraising, but that is a required part of the resolution.
And what if we don't get it from those places?
Oh, we might cross that bridge when we come to it, I suppose, but.
That was my point.
Mr. Thomas.
Through the chair, to further on that, if we agree to commit to finding funding, but say we get the grant, but the community for whatever reason kind of revolts against it and says, no, that's not what we want, do we still have to carry through with it? I mean, ideally,
we would decline the funding.
Yeah, this is, this, just to be clear, this resolution is to allow staff to apply. And if they win, then we are guaranteeing the government that if county staff, the community does choose this, then we will fund. Whether through borrowing, borrowing or stealing, we'll get the fund.
Does this require a referendum to vote this?
Yes. Noting the time, and I believe you've got, you actually have some fundraising meetings,
Fundraising
to go
meeting
to right
6
now.
minutes ago, yeah.
Let's,
To move the motion.
please go ahead, Councilor Pastor.
I'll move that the District of Tofino apply to the Green and Inclusive Community Buildings Grant Program in support of the Tofino Community Recreation Facility Project. And that should the application to the Green and Inclusive Community Buildings Grant Program be successful, the District of Tofino commits to securing the municipal share of project costs.
Seconded by Councilor Sawyer. All in favor? None opposed, motion is carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck. Okay, let's move right on here. 10.2, we've got application structure change to liquor license for Tofino Brewing Company. And I believe we have Chief Baker.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So yeah, the report to council is regarding the structural change to the manufacturer's liquor license for Tofino Brewing Company. Some of council have seen these applications before, but this may be fairly new for some of council as well too. So I thought prior to going straight to the choice of resolutions that I would just do a brief slide presentation on what the liquor license process looks like and what local government's responsibilities and role is for that process. Local governments in the liquor license process. So the role basically is to consider the impact of the license application on the community and to provide comments generally in the form of a resolution, which we will get to in a moment. A little hard for me to see with the glare here. Hopefully it's not too bad for most of you. But this is just an overview of the process at all three levels. So from the applicant across the top, the local government in the middle, and then apologize, this is from an old template. It's no longer LCLB. It's now Liquor Cannabis Regulation Branch. This template hasn't been updated. So the first interaction that local government has with the applicant is on that second stage there, where the applicant is providing their floor plans and the application to the municipality. This gives us the first opportunity to look over any of the zoning requirements and start to review their floor plans. So where this ties into our current application was the most recent process that council went through with the temporary use permit and going through that process to line that up so that we can even consider this next piece of the process. So when they do provide the floor plans, in a nutshell, how that works is it's basically square footage, subtracting any of the areas where there is bar service areas, aisleways in front of restrooms and entrances and things like that. And then for any licensed premises, we take that total square footage, divide that by 12.2 or 12.92 square feet, which is what is required per person for any licensed space. And that gives us the total number of people that are allowed into that licensed area. So that includes both the staff and the patrons of that facility. So that generally comes through myself to review the floor plans, go over, measure, do the calculations, stamp it. At that point, we come to council for this part of the process where we decide on the resolutions. After the resolution phase, then it's off to the licensing branch, and they move forward with their portion of the process, check in with us if they have any questions. But one thing that people often do ask is what types of applications are council going to be asked to provide comment on? So when it comes to any new liquor primary or liquor primary club license, amendments to a license, again, for liquor primary or liquor primary club, so relocations, extensions of the hours of liquor service, an increase to the person capacity, addition of a patio, transition from liquor primary club to regular liquor primary. With manufacturers licenses, a lounge endorsement, a special event area endorsement, increase to the person capacity again or hours of the lounge, increase in capacity, size, hours, or special event area. With food primary, it's a little bit less. So if it's requiring patron participation, and the examples that often come up is if a restaurant wants to offer dancing or karaoke, those sorts of things, or if they are looking to extend liquor service past midnight, again, it would come to council for the review. If the local government chooses not to provide comment, this does happen, and this has traditionally been my experience with council. It's probably been 6 or 7 times, and only one time has council chosen to actually go through the comment process. But it's decided on a case-by-case basis, just like we're here to do tonight, and by signing the application and indicating that they wish to opt out on the comment process. If that is the case, then the Liquor Cannabis Regulation Branch, they will take on the initiative of gathering the views of residents. They may request additional information from staff, the local government, First Nation, to determine if it would be in the public interest to approve that application. So that's basically the overview of how that process works. So again, today it's a structural change to the liquor license application in general. Recently, we did go through that temporary use process, so they are legally allowed to have the patio spaces, and so this is that next step in that process before they can move forward. So we've got the options for recommendations there, and council has any questions. So
thank you, Chief Baker. So just going to use this section for questions for Chief Baker, and then comments. We're gonna let Chief Baker sit down, and if we want to debate and have comments, and we'll do that after. If that's okay. Councillor Steer, questions for Chief Baker.
I don't have a question, but I will have a comment. But I can't seem to get my raise hand option, and oh, it's there. Look at that.
It's there.
Yeah, I will.
Let's just great. Thank you, Councillor Steer. We'll come back to comments. We'll just we're going to it's for questions for clarity for Chief Baker. Yes.
Just for clarity, so for choosing between the two options, if we decided that we see no issues with it because it's been operating as is, the most logical choice would be to not dedicate our staff time to that. Would that be seen as support, or if we wanted to offer support for it, would it be best to have our staff present in that sort of way?
yeah, I would prefer to look at it as though at this point we're not necessarily offering support. We're just choosing whether or not we want to undertake the next steps of gathering information and opinions of the public and those that may be affected, or if we want to leave that responsibility to the
Any questions? No questions for Chief Baker. Okay, well, I'm going to let you off the hook here, and then we can have comments from Councillor Steer, and we may call on you for clarification.
Of course, I'll stay close by.
Councillor Steer.
Great, thank you. through the chair. Yeah, just a quick comment. This is an application where I do not feel it is necessary for the district to provide input. We have had plenty of opportunity with this particular application to submit that, and I'm satisfied that all requirements and all concerns around public health and safety have been addressed. So I would not be in favor of staff using up their valuable time. I did want to make just one quick comment, and thank you once again, Chief Baker, for a really thorough report and explaining to council how this process works. In that, though, is where local government has the ability to provide input from residents that may be impacted by the application, and it's prescribed in a specific way, but local government always has the discretion to determine the method of collection and the areas of impact. And that is important on certain applications that we do receive. And I just wanted council to be aware of that. So I'll finish there and see if there's any other comments.
Excellent. Maybe I'll just look to council. Is anybody on the council, any councillors have a differing opinion than Councillor Stewart? Anybody, any councillor really desperately want to have staff undertake this? I see none. So I think what I'm going to do, let's go right to the second option. The second option for recommendation. Councilor Anderson, go ahead.
I'll move that the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Grant, LCRB, be advised that the District of Tofino Council does not wish to provide comments or recommendations to the branch affecting the application submitted by Tofino Brewing for a structural change to their liquor license number 30, 43, 47 to allow for a permanent patio as set out in the LCRB application signed January 2023.
Seconded by Councilor Master. Any further comments, debates on this from council? No, I'm fine. This, okay, seeing no comments, all in favor? None opposed, motion carries. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, 10.3, we have a zoning amendment, first reading for 5.1 Cypre Crescent. We have Mr. Kemp.
Mayor and Council. As was just noted, this is a brief presentation regarding the zoning amendment application for 521 Cypre Crescent. This council meeting, we are considering the first reading of the bylaw that has been prepared. The application was received on May 30th of 2022. Permission to proceed was granted on August 9th of 2022. So that was prior to the most recent election. This would be the first hearing for a few of the councillors. Since last August, staff have developed a bylaw with work with the applicant on the overall design and plan of the project. So the location of this property is right on the corner of Campbell Street and Cypre Crescent, fairly prominent location just before the main four-way stop sign at 4th and Campbell as you're coming into town. Right along. And taking a quick look at some of the policy, this was largely contained, I think, in Appendix 3 of the report, as well as in the audit main report. The vision to action, we find that it's generally aligned with the proposed project. There's no environmentally sensitive areas that are noted on the property. There's always the question of limits to growth that comes up anytime we consider an increase in density. Staff are of the opinion after reviewing relevant policy as well as the project in question that this actually represents a fairly reasonable proposal in line with many of our guiding documents. And so although we regularly kind of bandy about the idea of limits to growth, this is one of the more supportable projects that is currently under consideration. Looking at the official community plan, generally supportive. More information hopefully related to housing will be quite helpful for staff to go a little bit further, considering certain things around community amenity contributions, as well as the impact of the density on that area prior to the second reading. Housing needs assessment meets many of the supported actions, including smaller units, purpose-built rental units, units in town, those kinds of things. Multimodal transport plan is also very supportive of the application. It's in a high traffic area within walking distance to many of the downtown amenities and employment opportunities. There's also some additional proposed pedestrian infrastructure, bicycling infrastructure, which are all aspects of the NRT or aspects of noted actions within the NRTP. The land use demand study really talks largely about commercial industrial properties. However, there are some suggestions around residential, and this proposal is in line with those suggestions. The one thing that I did also want to note is the gateway development permit area. So this particular project, the location is impacted by the gateway development permit area. This is a separate process currently, although we are in the process of reviewing our development approvals process. It's currently held by council. So the ability to grant this development permit is held by council, and should that be maintained, and should the application be successful at a later date, the applicant will be coming back to council looking for a development permit. So those design guidelines are better addressed at that point in the development process. However, it's worth mentioning at this point that there is some conflict within the proposed stories of the development, as well as what's within the guidelines and roof line. This was some of the things that were really highlighted at the last council meeting. There were many comments about the proposed design. Again, these aren't directly related to the zoning at hand. However, it is worth considering, particularly if we are looking at something that allows for 3 stories, then the guidelines recommend 2.5 stories. If that's a major consideration at this point, it's the time to start thinking about that. I would also note that development permit areas, they're called guidelines because they are not strict policy or bylaw. So we typically aim, particularly with design guidelines, to match up whatever's being proposed as closely as possible with them, but it's very difficult to have something to be completely in line with everything. Again, design can be very subjective, and so those guidelines can be interpreted in a few different ways. So not particularly relevant, but something that is worth keeping in mind as we move through this process. You the next slide. So just a quick little chart here to outline some of the differences between the current zoning and the proposed zoning. The current zone is single family residential. It's a fairly standard residential zone here within the downtown area. It allows for 2 units. That would be the main house as well as a secondary suite. The proposed zone would actually have 25 units. I note that in the permission to proceed stage, the initial proposal was for 20 units. The applicant has asked for the potential to have 25 units. This would be within the same massing. However, that would just allow them to potentially have more studio units or single bedroom units should the market not be feasible for 2 or 3 bedroom units. So it would be a 23 unit increase. That's a fairly significant increase. It's one of the most significant parts of this particular application. The other being the addition of some commercial elements. The height, we'd be looking at an additional 3.6 meters. I do think it's worth noting, though, that 3.6 meters is largely due to the projection for the elevator shaft on top of the roof. So the actual living area and the average height, I would say, of the building, as well as the massing, looks to be more about 31 feet at this point. And that would be for 3 stories and flat roof. An additional 15% coverage. Front setback, the structure will be brought quite a bit closer to Campbell Street. No change to the rear setback, and little changes to the side setback. The east yard setback would actually be increased by 2.1 meters, but largely that's because there would be parking on that long. A few of the planning considerations, we talked a little bit about form and character already. The differences between what's proposed and EPA guidelines. This may not be particularly relevant at the rezoning stage, but again, one thing that I do want to reiterate is that if we do look at this zone and say, okay, we're happy to move forward with 3 stories, we're happy to move forward things that is, there's a certain expectation set that when we come back to the development permit stage, that 3 stories will be feasible. One of the things that staff have been considering is this kind of difference between height and stories. Currently, right now, in the R1 zone, 34-foot structure is allowed to be built there. If it's a single-family residence, there's no development permit guidelines attached to that. So currently, under the existing zoning, they could build a 34-story or 34-foot house with 2 stories and a completely flat roof. So it would actually not look too dissimilar from what is being proposed. Obviously, there's significant changes in density and coverage and things like that. But there is, as far as the massing, there's actually not a significant difference in height between the existing zone and what's being proposed. The applicant has also provided the design rationale. I think that's attached as Appendix 4. So that was, and we heard from the applicant earlier in this meeting as well. So hopefully that'll shed a little bit more light as to why the particular design is being advanced as it is. There have been some initial conversations around below market rental units and the particular tenure of the housing as well, whether it's going to be stratified or for rent. Primarily, my understanding is that the applicant would like to maintain all the units as rental, but that there's a little bit of finances that need to be worked out in terms of what's actually feasible with the market. And so those conversations are ongoing. We're hoping to have something a little bit more clear and solid for council prior to second reading, should we proceed today. The other significant planning consideration would be the addition of a cannabis retail store at this location as well. This is one of the driving forces of the application, would be to move the existing Daylight Cannabis store from up on Industrial Way down into this place within the next couple of years. The location is more visible than where the current two TUPs permit cannabis retail to occur. However, it does seem to be an adequate distance from other sensitive uses and not unreasonable. There was some conversation the last time that this particular application was brought before council to ensure that the cannabis retail store was not permitted to be facing onto Campbell Street and was only permitted to face Cypre Crescent. Staff think that that's a reasonable suggestion. If council is still supportive of that, that would be something that would be tied up into the covenants towards the end of this rezoning, along with any other considerations that aren't specifically written into the zone. And there's also nothing within the current cannabis retail policy that prevents this use from being considered. From the environmental perspective, there will be some removal of vegetation, trees on property. There's no environmentally sensitive areas or environmental DPAs, however, noted on the property. And staff feel that as this is a fairly close to downtown site, residential site, that the overall benefit of the additional housing is reasonable compared to the trade-off of losing a few of the second growth and other foliage on property. Traffic access and parking, this was another thing that came up during permission to proceed. We would be looking for a traffic impact assessment or some other similar study prior to second reading. Staff proposed that the parking is adequate. One of the major issues though is the lack of a loading zone. The commercial uses on the ground floor will likely need regular drop-offs depending on what the businesses are, but regular drop-offs of supplies. We've already seen some issues with restaurants not having loading zones in other areas of town, causing significant congestion, traffic issues, as well as safety issues for pedestrians and other motor vehicle drivers. So this is something that staff need to see resolved prior to second reading, essentially. So we're supportive of this first reading. However, there are still a few things that need to be worked out. I don't think they're insurmountable. They're largely engineering questions, but that's something we would put back to the applicant to organize for us and provide an acceptable solution prior to us supporting for moving forward with the project. Servicing kind of developed almost a standard process. We all know that water is a bit of an issue and sewer capacity is a bit of an issue. So we would ask for a servicing brief and water modeling to be reviewed by district engineering prior to second reading. Emergency services, so these are paramedics, fire response, etc. These we consulted through the referral process. There's no initial concerns from staff at this point. Flooding and tsunami, no major concerns. The property is outside of flooding area as well as the tsunami inundation area. Community lending contributions, it will likely revolve around affordable housing with some ongoing discussions as noted to be resolved prior to second reading. This particular application, we have opted into holding a public hearing, so there'll be related notifications leading up to the public hearing following second reading. Again, should we continue to move forward with this application, there may be some also additional communications on social media or talk to at that point, it's the end of my presentation, so I'm happy to answer any questions. And if there are some other options for motions to be made there at the end of the report. If you need me to read them out, I'm more than happy to have it here in front of me, or I'm sure you guys have as well. So if there are any questions,
excellent. Thank you, Mr. Thick. Okay, I'm going to open it up for questions for Mr. Thick. We'll do a round of questions for clarity. Mr. Thick. And then we'll do a round of comments. Councillor Anderson.
Okay, through the chair, my question, I have a few comments concerning the design aspects, form and character. And I understand it's early in the process to really comment or talk too much about that. I think it would benefit to developers and that sort of stuff. But so my question is, when is the best time to have that discussion? Will council be considering the development permit, or is that delegated to staff? will it just be the design review panel and then going back to staff, and will that be how that conversation happens? Or how will council participate in that aspect of it?
Thanks for the question, through the chair. Currently, the gateway development permits are issued by council. As I'm sure we're all aware, we're kind of going through this development approvals process review at the moment. And one of the questions before council that will have to be resolved as we start introducing some of these changes to development approvals bylaws would be whether council wants to retain the authority to issue those development permits, or if they would like to return them to staff, as was the case a few years ago. And so these kinds of applications are where these sorts of things start becoming a little bit more relevant. It's not actually very common for council to be reviewing too many development permits. Usually maybe it's 1 or 2 a year. But this would be kind of one of those things where currently council does have the ability to issue these permits. If that changes, then council would not have the ability to issue this permit. And it would likely change, if it is going to change, it would likely change prior to this rezoning being completed. So in those cases, if there's no development permit area, or if it's a development permit, if it's rezoning that will lead into a development permit that council does not control, staff usually try to resolve most of the design issues through the rezoning process. At this point, because we have a very specific form of character development permit area, staff are slightly less concerned. However, for the benefit of the applicant, for the benefit of staff, and really just transparency, it is never a bad idea to kind of flow one process into another. You know, we're rezoning something, we know what it's going to look like, so that when the development permit comes for council, there's not really any surprises, and it's usually kind of an easy thing to issue or to accept. In this case, I think the one thing that comes to mind immediately for me are the kind of the discrepancies that we see between the current design and the development permit area guidelines, largely around this 2.5 versus 3 stories, and the desire for more slanted roof lines as opposed to flat roof lines. These are subjective, but they are also within our guidelines, and so it's not impossible or ultra vires out of council's ability to approve if they want to approve something that doesn't match the guidelines precisely. Again, these are called guidelines for a reason. They're not hard and fast rules. However, it's usually nice for council to kind of understand maybe what's going to be coming before them. So to comment a little bit around the design is not unreasonable at this point. However, it's sometimes useful to couch that language closer in terms of rezoning. So typically with rezonings, we think about use and density. So if the height is 3 stories, or if the roof is flat and the council would really like to see it be slope, maybe the issue is that the density is too high and it needs to drop down a little bit. So that's a bit of a ramble, but hopefully the answers to the question.
Can I just follow up for clarity and just to jump in, just because this is interesting. So just for council's benefit, if councilors have an issue, as the previous council expressed with the height or the form and character, now is the time to really express issues with the height. I'm just saying that.
Thank you for the question, Mayor Law. I would say as height is a specific aspect of a zoning bylaw. I think height is something that is certainly useful to debate at this point. Maybe I'll stick with that. Height is a part of the zoning bylaw, so it's useful to debate that, and height often determines form as well.
Open up for council questions. Yes.
I'm sorry if this is in the report. I missed it. I've gone through the appendixes, and I noticed that there's a maximum number of residential units allowed. And then I read the wording from the developers on how they would have, the balance of rental and then for sale units. And the covenant proposed. What I'm curious, and I'm sorry if this was discussed at the previous meeting, is are there going to be measures to ensure that the units that are sold at market value do not turn into nightly rentals? And is there something, so we have a maximum number of residential units, do we have a minimum number? So the other thing I'm worried about is, would we approve this and then end up with 2 stories of commercial units and only 1 story of residential units? Because I do support building up and 3 stories, but not if it is not to benefit of residential units.
It's a question. There's no need to apologize for the questions there through the chair. The bylaw is written so that the commercial aspects would be at grade only. And then they would be permitted to have 2 stories of residential up to 25 units on those 2 stories above the commercial that would be at grade. Vacation rentals would not be permitted. They're generally not permitted in multifamily buildings. But yes, typically we try to avoid, there's I think 2 multifamily buildings that allow vacation rentals. That's the Ike Street building and the Fred Tibbs buildings. But no others do, just as a general prohibition within the zoning bylaw. So we would, the bylaw is written to ensure that commercial space can only exist on the ground floor, and residential spaces can only exist on the upper 2 floors. Basically, the bylaw is written to basically match what's being proposed by the applicant. Again, to kind of maybe probe a little bit deeper in your question, should this rezoning be granted and then move forward with the actual development, there's nothing that requires them to build to the maximum of their zoning. Typically, that's a prerogative for a developer. They want to make things as financially feasible as possible, and density is one way that they achieve those kinds of things. But if it turned out to be that the proposed design that eventually came forward following the rezoning was just for 1 story of commercial on the bottom and 1 story of housing on top, they would be within their zoning rights to apply for that. That answers your question.
It does, thank you.
Councillor Steer, did you have your hand up?
No, I'll reserve for comment. Thank you, Mayor Law.
Okay. Questions for the council? I have one. Besides some other, I'm sure we'll get into comments in a sec. And I might keep you up for comments because it's probably you want to hear the comments and you may be able to respond. So we'll break by rule of letting you have the comments. But anyway, besides some other stuff, just noting there's in one of the commercial units it's allowed for a restaurant. Now this is probably a little bit of a process question, and maybe is something I'm interested in. The way I see it is, if we're trying to solve a housing issue, we don't have enough housing for existing businesses, etc. And then in my understanding, restaurants are generally labor rich, and it means a lot of labor to a lot of employees to run a restaurant. Is there something in council's prerogative to be able to say, listen, if you put a restaurant, it kind of negates all the benefits of adding high density housing, because you basically increase the need for all of that housing. Is there something in council's prerogative that we can actually make those kinds of decisions to say, you know, you can put the commercial in, but you can't have a restaurant?
Certainly. Thank you for the question, Mayor Law. I think the best way to approach that would be to either at this point defer and not grant first reading, or grant first reading with some specific notes that kind of similar to what staff have done, where we say, you know, if this loading zone thing has not been resolved, it's going to be very difficult for us to support second reading. And maybe that's a comment that comes out of this is, you know, we're happy to support first reading. However, we don't support the restaurant use there. And so that if this bylaw isn't amended to reflect our suggestions or our requirements, it's unlikely that we'll be supporting a second reading. Yeah, typically I would avoid saying anything that you know holds you to a particular decision in the future. But those are kind of the comments that we often look for from council as staff, because then it makes it quite easy for us to go back to the applicant and say, well, you know, if you guys want, you can keep this restaurant or whatever use that's in there. However, when we go back for second reading, it probably just won't be supported. And they understand that. And the addition, just as a bit of history, the addition of the restaurant was something that came in fairly recently. It wasn't part of the initial presentation of permission to proceed. It largely came about as the applicant was looking for a little bit more flexibility in what could occupy those commercial spaces, so that the building could flex according to demand through time for different types of commercial spaces. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you. And just a follow-up question on that. So if council feels very strongly about something and hypothetically allows us to go or grants first reading with caveats like that one, it's just as an example, it's just one example. That would be a possibility as well for, say, grant first reading, but with a similar note on, say, height.
Certainly, through the chair, there is, I believe, the final section of the report outlines a few options. And the second option kind of outlines a potential resolution. It says that council expressed general support for the zoning amendment bylaw, and that staff be directed to discuss the following amendments with the applicants. Or you could say that the council would like to, grant first reading at this time. However, we could, through the comments and the notes that staff make, really have a very clear idea of what we can bring back to the applicant at that time. Again, it depends on council's comfort level at this point. If the council is more comfortable with the application being deferred until a later date and not granted first reading, that's one way to approach it. Otherwise, granted first reading is fine. Council is going to see this again second and third reading, so there's a few more times to kind of get things right and finesse the bylaw. Should it not be perfect.
Great. I just kind of wanted to take some time because we have new council. Good chance to explain all those things. Councilor
Through the chair, not that hyper focus on the restaurant aspect, but if you were to say, yes, you can have a restaurant there, would that change staff's opinion of the parking? Because generally people would park at a restaurant and hang out for a couple of hours and then again with that.
That's great. Thank you for the question. Through the mayor, through the chair. I suppose the easiest way to answer this is that it's a bit of a, I'm trying to not get into kind of barstool philosophy, but at this point in time, as a professional planner, staff are of the opinion that it maybe is not in the district's best interest as a municipality to predicate the kind of planning that a particular, or predicate the kind of parking that a particular business might need. What's more useful is maybe to say, okay, you want to have this type of business here, and you think you can run it without parking, and that will allow us more density and more housing, which is what we want, then that's all right. The trade-off is always the concern that parking will be pushed off into residential zones or other areas like that, as we occasionally see. However, as we start to see the pay parking come into play a little bit more, that may be slightly less of a concern. So at this point, staff are sort of starting to take the approach that mandating minimum parking may be not actually that useful. Although this is not necessarily a perfect application, I think it's one of those situations where we have to be wary that the perfect is often the enemy of the good, and that some sort of good progress at the cost of maybe some particular things is actually better than no progress at all. And that's, so again, I'll stop there because I don't want to sit up here and then start ranting about stuff that's very subjective. But that's kind of the approach the staff have taken for this particular application.
Question, Councilor Anderson.
Yeah, my question is around the details of the comprehensive development zone aren't really completely nailed down, it seems, yet at this point in the proposal, and that there's some flexibility around the ratio of rental and maybe strata or for sale units. And I understand that the province recently created a different sort of a thing that we can now zone for residential rental specifically. And I'm just wondering how or when, I guess maybe a second reading, will that come back with more detail through the chair? What proportion of rental versus other type of units, and will those units just be called residential units, or will they have this new category that the province has allowed us to create a zoning specific to rental residential units? Because I'd be very supportive of that. I think we need the rental units in the mix, and when things are simply called residential, it kind of, yeah, will they end up becoming strata later if they decide not to rent them, all that kind of thing. I'd be interested to know if some of the units in the comprehensive bill and some will come back with that rental specific zone. And maybe we don't know that right now. Maybe the current owner has said.
For the question, Councilor Anderson, through the chair. That's correct. We don't exactly know the conversations that we've had with the applicant. Initially, the idea was that this was going to be a purpose-built rental building. There's two ways that we can secure rental tenure on units in a multifamily building. One is through using that rental tenure zoning that's recently been added to municipalities' powers that you mentioned a couple of years ago by the provincial government. Another opportunity is to use a no stratification covenant and require that to be signed prior to adoption of the zoning bylaw. That's typically how it was done prior to this new authority being added by the provincial government. At this point, we're not sure what the breakdown is going to be. The applicant was initially interested in doing purpose-built rental. However, for the purposes of financing the project, it may be that some pre-sales have to happen, in which case some of the units would have to be stratified. Obviously, this makes a bit of a difference to potentially the community amenity contribution, as well as just the overall supportability of the density and the project as a whole. So that's something that we would like to get nailed down from the applicant prior to second reading, but it's not something we know at this point. But the goal would be to secure as many as either purpose-built rental only, or if there were going to be multiple strata titled units, we would probably look to have at least one or two of those be working with the PHC in order to be sold at below market prices. That's typically the approach that we've taken.
Okay, further questions for Mr. Fick? Okay, well, let's do a round of comments because I really want to, I think the applicant, Mr. Fick, and all of us want to find out where it comes to that with some of the hot button issues discussed at permission to proceed. So let's go around. Councilman Astor.
Similar to Councilor Thomas, I have concerns about parking on Northern Corner, but it's a really congested area already. And if we're looking at 21 parking spots for 25 units and a commercial element as well, I think that's just asking for trouble. I'd almost rather say, well, let's provide more residential units and no parking at all. Then everybody knows, but you just enforce all parking onto the street, and people are going to be prepared to pay whatever the fee is to pay for the parking. So I have real concerns about that.
Excellent. Let's go right around the room. Let's. Mr. Sawyer, do you have any comments for Mr. Fick and the applicant?
Yeah, I think that my comments would probably be reflected from my questions. Just seeing this as a project that I would be interested in hearing further readings on, given that would increase our housing. I personally, obviously, would like to see more than a 10% of unit commitment to long-term renting in the proposed plan by the developer. That would be a bonus for me. That would perhaps alleviate some of the concerns that would come along with the project, like housing, like further businesses or parking. So.
I just had notes on one, agreeing with wanting the loading zone, not just for the commercial aspect, but also for the residential, because I live in the unit building. We have 24 units, and the amount of moving in and out that happens throughout the year is quite significant. So that ends up tying stuff up quite a bit. So it might be easy for them to be like, oh, the commercial might not need it, but they'll definitely need it for residential as well. The other comment was on it being 3 stories, and I am totally fine with that. And understanding that the additional height gives us additional units of people living in them.
That's actually a good point, actually. Thank you, Councilor Thomas. I would like everybody, because it was a significant issue with the previous council, we should see if people can comment on height.
actually one question.
Oh,
And
that's
I
a question.
forgot it in the question period, I'm
Go ahead.
sorry.
It's
Through the chair, it was relevant to the roof, because it seemed to be a point of contention that they wanted to do a flat roof instead of a sloped roof. And I wanted to know if there was any reason for that beyond aesthetics.
Certainly, thanks
So
for
I
the
don't know
question.
anything about building.
Oh, yeah, no, through the chair, my understanding, and I think this was, the applicant might have written it more eloquently than I did in their design rationale, but the flat roof is actually going to serve as an upper deck. So it's going to be an outdoor space for the people that actually live in the building. So that's largely one of the primary drivers behind that design. The other would be to kind of keep the height a little bit lower, but also be able to fit 3 stories in there with the slope roof. To get into a reasonable height, so you might have to reduce it to 2.5 stories.
I was totally understanding of that, and in favor of that. I just wanted to know if a sloped roof had any sort of design asset. I don't know how to word that. Like, is there any benefit to having a sloped roof aside from it's just a personal opinion of some people that would look better?
Sure, thanks for the question. Again, to the chair, it's
I know
somewhat
it's
somewhat
like-
subjective.
Yeah.
I would say it's typically in places where it rains a lot, you might want to have a sloped roof. That tends to work quite well with to avoid water pooling on the roof and those types of things. Largely though, I think it is primarily an aesthetic decision, a massing decision, and to be honest, it might be a financial decision. I don't know exactly how much the proposed building will cost to build, but perhaps the flat roof will also be cheaper.
So good. Councilor Anderson.
Okay, I'll just make some comments specifically about the zoning first, and I'll finish up with, I don't know, a whole list, so may as well get them all out at once. I'll finish up with a few design comments. So I agree with the staff report that a traffic study will be needed, and I think that ties in with some parking concerns that have already been noted. And also, I have concern around the restaurant use and that impact on parking. And I agree with Mayor Law's point that restaurants are labor intensive and create other needs in the community for more housing, for instance. So the parking and loading need addressing, and hopefully the traffic study would give us some better ideas around that. I'm open to some flexibility around the number of parking spots if car share or bike share options might become part of the development, including bike storage and electric vehicle readiness, if not spots created for electric vehicles and possibly electric vehicle sharing. I'm interested in having some of the zoning for the residential units become this new option available to us, that they're specifically for rental. And I'm also flexible on noting that the developer does have to, and any developer needs some flexibility in financing options. So I'm flexible on some of the ideas around stratification and units for sale. I think the housing amenities proposed the 10 years, 10% or something like that, are not ideal. And I would like to see more long-term amenities, such as we negotiated with the another where some of the units were to be sold for the market and also to be covenanted for that. So those kinds of things, for longer term, lower rents or something. Housing agreements, I think, need to be in place and not expire after 10 years. I think this is the kind of density and that we need in Tofino to achieve some of our affordable housing goals. So I'm okay with the density. And finally, on height and the massing, I'm a little surprised actually that the comparison to the current building on the left, I was a little surprised to see that some of the setbacks and the differences weren't that great. 3 meters is something like 14 feet or 12 feet, and more like 9 feet, I guess, higher than the building that's there. So 9 or 10 feet higher isn't the end of the world. I think some of that massing could be softened with slope roofs, but I know some other buildings, such as the Wood building, that the massing is softened also by fairly tall trees being planted around it. And also at Sea Otter, that the plantings that were used, they just didn't plant short trees. They got some fairly big trees, and they gained height very quickly over 3 to 5 years, more in that range. So I think some of those height things could be mitigated with some good landscaping options, maybe some green roof options, rooftop garden options as well might soften the impact of a very boxy building and one where the massing is, massing is on full display, right? The squareness of the building. So the kind of things that reduce massing are slope roofs, or when the stories are stepped in as it moves back from the street. And that is not proposed at this point. Yeah, so I think that's it. Also on the plaza, it would be great if either space could be left or public park could be installed as part of the project. Oh my God. Mr. Dick?
Thanks, thank you, Mayor. I just have one point for clarity. Comparing the current zoning to the proposed zoning was just comparing the zones. It wasn't comparing the existing structure. The existing structure is actually shorter than what could be could be built in that area. Typically, when we look at rezonings, I compare the zone to the zone, not what's currently on the lot. So there will certainly be a large difference between what could be built through this rezoning versus what exists.
Thanks for correcting.
Yeah, so, yeah, just to clarify.
Well, for me, I actually really do have a problem with the height. I find it from the aesthetics of it, I find it completely overwhelming. I think, like Phil said, pitched roof could really help with that. I think landscaping as well could help with that, or the retention of some of that vegetation would be, I think, optimal. One of the things I found was kind of alarming for me was the reduction of the setback from 7.5 meters from Campbell Street to 1.5 meters. I think with that height of the building, I think that's going to really negatively impact the gateway kind of feel our downtown core. So that's my thoughts on the sizing. And yeah, the parking aspect, I think is going to be a big issue. And the accessing of it, if there's, I think, any kind of commercial development, because the access is along a one-way alley. I mean, I guess this engineer study will dictate that, if that's feasible at all. But to me, I just can't get my head around how, if there's no loading, how that can happen with this huge building on this lot. So I support the accommodation part of it, but I just feel like the whole thing is a little bit too big.
Councilor Steer.
Great, thank you. Through the chair. Yeah, so many of the comments I support, and I'll just touch on the ones that we've been going over. This project, and I'm in support of this project right off the top. The OCP and many of our guiding documents are very clear about support for this project and many of the aspects. So when I look to all of those, this is a very, very supportable project. In terms of the form and character that has been talked about quite a bit, I believe, you know, within that the development permit time, when that comes, this will be our opportunity. I think it's been very clear some of the issues that have been brought forward by council, and I'm sure the applicant is listening and staff have been well aware of those comments. And through that gateway development permit time, we'll have a lot more to say, I am sure. In terms of the retail aspect, the cannabis application, I think this is a great way of showing that this applicant has listened around the rezoning process for when they applied for the license to begin with, knowing that the industrial waste site would not be the appropriate place long term. So they're proactively moving forward on this. So I support that aspect in terms of cannabis, and certainly about not having it front facing. The applicant has heard and has made those adjustments around that. Probably the biggest issue in terms of my further support for the project is around the affordability issue and the housing issue. And I'm looking forward to hearing much more detail in how that will be proceeding forward. It is one of the tools that council does have to look at ways of ensuring that we have the types of housing that this community is in dire need of, and that has been clearly articulated in our housing needs assessments. So with that in mind, I'm sure the applicant has heard very clearly this will be a critical part of the further support for this project in terms of the housing structure of which they may move forward with, and the most certainly the affordability criteria. 10% is a figure that was thrown out, but I think there's a much deeper conversation that could be had in ways of structuring affordability and to still make it a viable project for the applicant. I'll quickly touch on servicing, and it was something that has been brought up several times, and we do have part of our development agreement that the district will have the authority to refuse to issue a building permit should sufficient water not be available. So of course, the servicing is going to be very important because this is one of those projects I do support. And if I am going to support, quote, growth, and that's a much bigger question, this is the type of growth that I would like to see, that density with the appropriate type of housing in Tofino. But just so that council knows that we do have the ability, if we don't have enough water through our water modeling work that will be done for this project, we have at the building permit stage the ability to say no to a project. And this would be well articulated to the applicant, I hope. I'll leave it at that because I think many of the, parking, of course, many of the comments Councillor Anderson spoke to, I'm very much supportive. I do recognize the issues around parking, but I'm much more concerned about parking people than I am vehicles. Understanding that there are going to be issues and ways of mitigating it, I think are out there through our multimodal transportation plan and some of the considerations that we can have with the applicant around parking and how we might look at ways of mitigating the need for further parking. Almost every jurisdiction and community that I've gone to recently, and I've been to a lot of them, parking has been addressed first and foremost in the aspect. Now we're moving towards understanding that to park cars instead of people is a backwards way of going. So we have to provide the infrastructure where cars are not necessary. I know we live rurally. I'll leave it at that. The loading zone issue is going to be a big one. I think everybody here is clear with a building of this size and with a commercial nature to it, with the issues that we've really in that neighborhood, some of those issues are front and center. So this is something the applicant is going to have to address in some format for this project to move forward. I'll leave it at that, and we'll see where this goes.
Super. Thank you. Okay, my comments are. I haven't heard a lot of. Just to be clear, I haven't heard a lot of concern about the height. Councilor Sloan. So you made your comments clear. I personally have. I find the height and the design form a character difficult, but and I'm just going to go through a couple other things later. But seeing how council is generally aligned with the density, I'd be willing to support the increased height. I do want to note that it's 3 stories, but it's actually 3.5 stories because there's going to be people on top and structured up there, I'm sure, and people walking around, an extra thing. And that does slightly concern me and how the neighbors would see that, because it's actually quite a lot higher, and then there could be potential for noise, people looking across into your windows down, stuff like that up there, who knows, but whatever. I'd be willing to flex on the height, as long, personally, my opinion, as long as the applicant could make significant movement in the design, breaking up the walls and breaking up the roof. I'm not stuck on a curved roof line, although to be fair, the actual upstairs courtyard is in the center of the building. It isn't actually on the flat roofs that people will see. So I found that that argument a little bit off. That's I'd be willing to go as long as there was a significant design, because this is going to be one of the first buildings people see coming to town. It's very large. It would be very imposing, and we do have to make sure that the buildings that we do allow in Tofino, in my mind, add to the charm of Tofino instead of eroding it. That is something that's central to our culture, central to our town, and certainly central to our economy. I have some specific things I would like to see if council chooses to go forward to grant first reading. I would absolutely not grant second reading without, or vote for second reading without a loading zone. I'm not in favor of a restaurant. It's mentioned. I think the parking will probably take care of itself, as everybody's quite aware that that's an issue. And also, so I would actually like to see, like, if we go forward with first reading, granted first reading, I would like to see those things. Throwing it out there to council for those things actually in the recommendation. I just noticed there was a little bit of difference of opinion, according to the letter from the applicant. They were unsure of where the cannabis store would go, but I believe that council and staff have been pretty clear from the backside. So I want to make sure that the applicant is aware of that and in agreement. And also the applicant's response to the possibility of a 10-year covenant for rentals at 30% below market value. I'm not in support of that. I think I would like to see something more significant than that, as getting units for THC or some kind of transfer. I think that's really what I have to say. So we can I can look to council. We've got a couple options here. We can the first option, of course, is just straight up with the District of Tofino introduces and reads this the first time, so grant first reading. The council expressed general support for the Tofino zoning amendment bylaw and direct staff to come back with some of these issues more nailed down. Now that's here, just a question for you, Mr. Dick. I understood that the second option was grant first reading with amendments. Is that is correct?
Thank you, Mayor. I don't believe that's correct the way it's currently worded. Typically, when we think about these types of zoning amendments, when we grant first reading, it is possible to amend it on the fly. I would not recommend that council do that because the language can be quite tricky, and it's also a little bit off-putting to the applicant to have their proposal changed without them having a chance to respond in any way. So typically, what we find is that it's either useful to, if council is comfortable, they grant first reading. However, with the comments and with what I've heard and what the applicants heard, it's well understood that we won't be considering second reading until some of these things have been resolved, that have been noted by council. Otherwise, if council's uncomfortable with that, they feel that they don't quite have enough to go on to grant first reading. You can essentially defer the application, which is what the second.
Okay.
So we've kind of changed this up from what they used to be. And the second option would be to essentially defer the application not deny it, but just defer first reading until a later date until these things are resolved and then grant first reading at that point. So if council is comfortable enough with granting first reading, knowing that these things will be resolved by second reading, then that's one way to approach it. I would recommend just reading the first recommended resolution from staff. And then staff will take the comments that we've heard today, and hopefully the applicant has heard them as well. And we will either wait to bring something back to second reading until all these things have been resolved, or if the applicant's unable to resolve them, we would likely bring it back to second reading with maybe a motion to deny, or at least a strong explanation as to why potentially it should still be supported. And so that allows for these kind of conversations to happen between staff and the applicant between first and second reading. There's also a significant amount of work that will have to be done by the applicant, largely on engineering studies between first and second reading. Or if council is not comfortable with moving forward that far at this point in time, the second motion would be appropriately express general support. However, we're not comfortable granting first reading at this time until X, Y, and Z are resolved, and then we'll come back to first reading, whenever those things are resolved, and try and move forward at that point.
Well, then what I'll do is look to council. I have a note in my own. Oh, sorry, Councillor Steer, go ahead.
Through the mayor. Yeah, Mayor Law, I think you maybe were going to address this. I was just going to comment, as you had asked for a comment, maybe on moving forward. Were you, maybe I'll wait for you to finish what you were going to say, and then I'll chime in.
Well, no, actually, I was going to look to council. I mean, I have my own opinion, but I was just going to say that the option here for council to consider is that if we defer with specific recommendations, then that does let the applicant know that these things have to be addressed, and or at least come back. But if council is willing, I think here is the question for council, is that if we, everybody said their piece, the applicant, staff have heard it, we expect some, it to return before second reading with some, some of these questions nailed down. I think the question for council is council willing at that point to deny it if these things aren't addressed to council satisfaction? That's the question I think that I put towards council, so that council is prepared and the applicant is prepared for so there's no surprise.
I would love to comment after that.
So there you go. That's my comments, Council Steer, and then we'll go for you, and then we'll put down Council Thomas.
Great, thank you. Through the chair. Yeah, I'm very much in favor of proceeding with first reading. The second part of the option where it talks about general support, that's what the permission to proceed stage is, and that's what we've already gone through, and we've already expressed general support for the project. Historically, when we go through this process at the first reading stage, through permission to proceed and then to the first reading stage, the applicant has heard loud and clear what council has brought forward. Staff has heard loud and clear what has been brought forward, and we'll be taking that in conversation with the applicant. I'm concerned about the delays in process and having the ability at second reading, if the applicant has not heard and met the requirements that have been stated clearly in this council meeting, at second reading, there is an opportunity once again to have a conversation to say, we are not going to proceed at this point because you have not met the concerns that have been brought forward to council. My concern is delaying this process by taking it back and having us to go through before we even get to a first reading. This is a 25 unit residential, potential 25 unit residential that I think we need to be looking at the bigger picture on this. The devil will be in the details. We've already made it very clear. We have a development permit process to go through as well around form and character. And I think we should be proceeding with first reading at this time.
Oh.
I'm in agreement with Councillor Steer that I'm comfortable doing the first reading. I think the issues with the loading zone staff is already addressed with the developer, so that's probably something that should be something that they're being mindful of and preparing for the second reading. With the hesitations around the restaurant, I can see pros and cons for having it or not having it. I don't feel comfortable putting that as an amendment as something that they absolutely cannot do. That's it. So I'm in favor of option number 1.
All right, any further comments from council? Generally, yes, Councilor Anderson?
Yeah, I disagree with, I just agree, I don't disagree. I'm agreeing with Councilor Steer and Councilor Thomas, and I mean, to do anything other than give it first reading, and they've done a fair bit of work, considering the stage that they're at. There's details to work out, everyone understands that. To do anything other than give it first reading is sort of starting to stand in the way and not enabling some housing development to go forward. So I'm in favor of first reading.
I'm happy to get first reading. I have lots of concerns, but I think we need housing. I think we should proceed. But those concerns aren't satisfied. We'll get that.
Okay, well, then I think we've got certainly got a majority that are willing to do a first reading. So then let's go ahead. Somebody can read the recommendation. Option one.
I move that District of Tofino zoning amendment bylaw number 1326, 2023 be introduced and read the first time.
Second.
Master, any further comments? We certainly don't all have to agree. Seeing no further comments, all in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Okay.
So let's talk about parking.
Oh, yes, that's right. Okay, so here we go. 10.4 zoning amendment bylaw number 1286. This is the changes to the CDOT parking requirements. There is no presentation.
Thank you, Mayor. There is no presentation, but if any councillors would like to continue talking about parking, I'm more than happy to answer any questions.
Who's dying to talk about parking? Okay, Councilor Thomas.
My question wasn't about parking, it was about secondary suites. Just because I delved into this a little bit and I understand it, sorry through the chair, a secondary suite is not considered a dwelling unit. Is a secondary suite not considered a dwelling unit? So I should break that question.
Answer the question to the chair. It is considered a dwelling unit. We consider it a separate dwelling unit within a larger dwelling unit. So for example, a standard house that we would allow, the house and suite, we would consider that 2 dwelling units.
Great, so under that would be a parking space for the original one and a parking space for the second one. So that would be 2 parking spaces and not the 1.5 reduced down to 1 that they are interpreting it as.
Thanks again for the question. This is through the chair. This is a very fun part of our zoning bylaw that is very confusing. It's our within part 7 of our zoning bylaw, we have a chart that outlines required parking requirements for various zones. And it's actually typically people do the opposite thing. So we require 1 parking space per 1.5 dwelling units. So you actually typically reduce down. So you'd say, okay, we have 2 dwelling units, you divide that by 1.5, I think you get 1.3. And then within our zoning bylaw, if anything's 0.6 or above, we round up, 0.6 down, we round down. So you would only be required under our bylaw to have 1 off-street parking space in order to get a building permit for that building.
I just said that one.
No, it is quite confusing. So I understand.
I had a question about enforcement. There was a comments in the report or in the letter about trouble with people parking on the street or edging out and safety concerns, et cetera, et cetera. Whose responsibility is to enforce those infractions?
Thank you for the question, Eva. It's a little bit of an interesting kind of situation. That Ocean Park is a strata, the Ocean Park neighborhood is a strata. So typically those roads it's all private. Those roads are private roads, they're strata property. So it is typically not the district. The district just doesn't have the jurisdiction to go and enforce on parking there. However, a few years ago, the strata actually came to the district and said, this is becoming an ongoing issue for us. We can't manage it ourselves. Is there anything the district can do to support us in managing, parking on street, and allowing the district bylaw officers to come through there once in a while and issue warnings or tickets as necessary to vehicles that are parked illegally on the street. So what happened was Chief Baker actually has designated the entirety of Ocean Park Drive as a fire lane. And the district can then enforce, because it's a fire lane, and fire lane must be kept clear. District bylaw officers can then go in and now enforce. So it is something that the district does have the authority over. However, it's something that the Ocean Park Strata, in my understanding, at least asked the district to come and help them with. So certainly the district does have the jurisdiction to do that. It's not something that happens regularly. However, there was a warning issued to one car parked just the other day, actually, but it's not a common occurrence. But yeah, it is something that bylaw officers can do.
Thank you. Okay. Is there any opposition to the direction staff taken with this? Okay, great. Then let's have somebody can read this one out.
Is that the report titled Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 1286, changes to CVOP parking requirements dated February 21, 2023, be received for information.
Second by Councillor Anderson. Any further comments?
I just wanted to say a quick comment that I do understand where they're coming from with this, but I'm still going to be in favor of the recommendation because I don't think we can cherry pick and just go in and start, like they say in the report, we can't go in and start just making changes every time somebody kind of has a complaint. That's been a blanket thing. So yeah, sorry. I guess there's a little bit of hesitation because I understand I'm empathetic to what they're bringing up to us, but I understand from our point of view and from the community's point of view about why.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. Any further comments? Okay, all in favor? None opposed, motion carried. Thank you. Well, do we have business initiated by council members? Yes, we do. Councilor Steer, I've been waiting for it.
Well, actually, it's just a quick one regarding the ACRD, but not around the financial planning. It was just a quick update for council on the Sort and Go program. This is some really good news. Over 35 tons of organics have already been diverted from the landfill. This has been a tremendous success. Over 800 applications, and this is going to extend the life of the landfill. It's reducing our carbon footprint. This has been a very successful rollout of this program so far. So I just wanted to share that with council.
Excellent. Excellent. It seems to be going off fairly without too much of a hit. Eh?
Yeah, they're through the chair. Yeah, they're working through all the little bugs here and there. They've had excellent response times when issues do come up. So yeah, so far all the feedback that's coming back from Jody at the ACRD, who's in charge of the program, has been extremely positive.
Excellent. Thank you. Any other business issued by council members? Yes, Councilor Sloan.
Well, I met with the Tourism Tofino Scholarship Committee, and they are working hard to make the deadline to meet the scholarship.
Excellent. Any others from council? Seeing none, moving on to question period. Mr. Shortall.
Yes, Mayor Law. At this point, I'll ask any members of the public if they'd like to ask a question or make a comment. You can do so now. You'd need to leave your name, your address, and the agenda item you're speaking to. I'll call once, call twice, calling 3 times, and at this point, there is no questions, Mayor Law.
Thank you, Mr. Shortall. Then we will move into the closed session. Who wants to read that? Go ahead.
I'll move that the meeting be closed to the public pursuant to sections 90 of the community charter to discuss matters relating to 1A, personal information of an identifiable individual who holds or is being considered for position not municipality or not a municipality. 1C, labor relations or other employee relations. 1E, the occupancy of expropriation of land from business. Expected to harden the municipality. 1I, the receipt of advice that is subject to solicited client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. 1L, discussions with municipal officers and employees respecting municipal objectives. measures and progress reports, preparing an annual report under section 98 and then.
Second by Councilor